Scout-Commander Yrel Dashkov had exactly 4 seconds to understand what she was looking at before her entire world stopped answering. The sensor array aboard her stealth cutter had been drinking in data from the edge of the Threll aura system for 6 hours, patient as a spider, when the anomaly bloomed across her display. 17 vessels dropping out of transit space in perfect formation, their hulls drinking light instead of reflecting it, their engine signatures folding space in a pattern her threat assessment computer had never catalogued. Human ships, not the sluggish colony freighters her people had mocked in briefing rooms for a decade. War-shaped things, silent and precise. She keyed her comm to flash a warning back to the Threll aura relay station. The channel returned only static, then the relay's tracking beacon, a signal that had pulsed steadily for 40 years, marking the heart of her people's most fortified frontier system, simply stopped. Not damaged, not jammed, erased. As if someone had reached out and switched off a star, Yrel stared at the dead channel, her 4 hearts hammering in her chest, and understood with sudden, sickening clarity that whatever had just happened to Threll aura, it had happened in under 60 seconds, and none of her people had gotten off a single distress call. But this story hadn't started with silence. It had started 3 weeks earlier, with a joke. The joke had come from Fleet Marshal Orvin Kesk, addressing the assembled war council of the Skarn Dominion, aboard the command citadel above their capital world. The humans, he'd said, swirling a glass of fermented cinder nectar, send us apology letters when their survey drones drift too close to our borders. Apology letters, gentlemen. This is the species Threll aura's governor wants us to fear. The room had laughed. Even Yrel, junior scout commander though she was, had allowed herself a thin smile, because everyone knew the stories. Humans were slow to anger and slower to build. Their fleets were scattered thin across 100 colonies, more concerned with trade routes and diplomacy than conquest. The Skarn Dominion had spent 3 centuries carving an empire from the bones of 7 conquered species, and humanity, by every metric their intelligence division could produce, was not a threat worth losing sleep over. The princess had overlooked one crucial detail, though nobody in that room would understand it until it was far too late. Princess Thessaly Korrin, heir to the Dominion throne and the War Council's newest and most ambitious voice, had proposed the operation herself. Threll aura sat on a resource-rich border system, technically neutral ground under a decades-old treaty, but the Dominion scouts had detected human survey teams, cataloging the system's asteroid belts. Rich in the rare crystalline ore the Dominion's shipyards desperately needed. Thessaly's plan was elegant in its cruelty: seize the system quietly, eliminate the small human survey presence, and present the Dominion's expansion as a fait accompli before any human council could organize a response. They will protest, she told the War Council, her voice carrying the confident polish of someone who had never once been told no. They will send diplomats. By the time their bureaucracy finishes debating whether to care, Threll aura will already be ours, and they will accept it, because that is what humans do. They accept losses quietly and call it peace. Nobody in that chamber knew that Threll aura's human survey team had, 6 months earlier, quietly requested a permanent monitoring presence after detecting unusual Dominion scout activity along the border, a request Humanity's Frontier Command had granted without fanfare. Without press releases, without a single diplomatic cable that Dominion intelligence ever intercepted. That was the first mistake. It would not be the last. Commander Yrel had been assigned to lead the initial reconnaissance sweep, a routine task she'd expected to complete without incident. Her cutter, cloaked and silent, slipped past the system's outer markers 3 days before the invasion fleet was due to arrive. Tasked with confirming the human presence was as minimal as intelligence claimed. What she found instead made her blood run cold. Buried in the debris of an ordinary-looking asteroid mining platform, the kind of unremarkable installation the Dominion's analysts had dismissed as harmless, she detected layered defensive architecture, unlike anything in her threat database. Sensor arrays disguised as communication relays. Weapon emplacements hidden beneath what should have been simple docking clamps. And beneath it all, a network of drones so quiet her scanners had nearly missed them entirely. Arranged in a pattern that looked, unmistakably, like a kill zone. That wasn't even the biggest surprise. Deeper in the system, hidden behind the glare of Threll Aura's binary stars, her passive sensors caught the ghost signature of something massive. Too large to be a survey vessel, too well shielded to identify. She logged the anomaly, transmitted a priority warning back to Dominion Command, and watched in mounting dread as her superiors dismissed it as sensor ghosting caused by stellar interference. Humans do not build hidden fortresses, Fleet Marshal Kesk told her directly, his patience thin. They build apology letters. Proceed with the operation as planned, Scout Commander. Do not embarrass yourself with fantasies. She had followed her orders. That was the second mistake, though it wasn't hers to own. The invasion fleet arrived on schedule, 40 Dominion warships translating into the Threll Aura system in a formation designed to overwhelm any resistance within minutes. Princess Thessaly herself rode aboard the flagship Ember Crown, eager to witness her strategic triumph firsthand, certain that whatever token human presence remained would surrender or flee the moment Dominion warships filled their sky. For the first 11 minutes, everything went exactly as she'd predicted. Human survey vessels scattered. Automated distress beacons activated and fell silent almost immediately, jammed by Dominion countermeasures. The princess allowed herself a moment of satisfaction, already composing in her mind the announcement she would deliver to the War Council. Everything changed in the next few seconds. The asteroid mining platform Yrel had flagged, the one everyone dismissed as ordinary, opened along seams that shouldn't have existed, revealing weapon batteries that had been dormant, patient, and utterly invisible to Dominion sensors for the entire duration of the operation. In the same instant, the massive hidden signature behind the binary stars decloaked. Not one ship, but an entire battle fleet, 17 vessels of a design the Dominion had never catalogued, their hulls drinking light rather than reflecting it, moving with a coordinated silence that felt less like a military response and more like the closing of a trap that had been years in the making. The truth stunned the entire Dominion War Council when the first garbled transmissions reached them hours later. This had never been an undefended border system. It had been bait. Aboard the Ember Crown, Princess Thessaly watched her carefully planned conquest dissolve into chaos within minutes. Dominion ships that moments before had been advancing in confident formation now scrambled to reorient, their sensors flooded with contacts, their communications jammed by a level of electronic warfare sophistication that should not have existed in a species the Dominion had dismissed as unthreatening. "Status," she demanded, gripping the arm of her command chair hard enough to bruise. "We're losing the Pharaoh and the Grail," her tactical officer reported, voice cracking under strain. "Their shields, Highness, their shields aren't failing under our fire the way the models predicted. It's like they've been studying our weapon signatures for years." They had been. That was the third mistake, and it belonged to every analyst who had ever assumed a quiet species was a weak one. Admiral Renata Cho, commanding the human response fleet from the bridge of the UNS Solus bound, had spent 4 years preparing for exactly this moment, ever since Frontier Intelligence first flagged unusual Dominion scouting patterns along the Threll Aura border. She hadn't wanted a war. Nobody on her crew had. But, when the survey team stationed on that asteroid platform first reported Dominion vessels probing their perimeter with weapons live, Cho had made a decision that would define the rest of the conflict. Humanity would not announce its strength, it would simply be ready, quietly, patiently, for as long as it took. "Hold formation," she ordered now, watching the Dominion fleet's confident advance collapse into disorganized retreat on her tactical display. "Target their command and communication relays only. We are not here to slaughter them. We're here to make sure they never do this again." Nobody knew what the human admiral was hiding until her flag officer, Captain Idris Okafor, quietly activated a secondary transmission. Not a weapon, but a message, broadcast on every frequency the Dominion fleet could still receive, translated into flawless Dominion High Court dialect. This is Admiral Renata Cho of the United Nations Fleet. The message began. You attacked a system under treaty protection, believing us too weak to respond. You were wrong. We have disabled your command relays, not to destroy you, but because we would rather end this today than fight it for the next decade. Surrender your remaining vessels, and your crews will be returned home unharmed. Continue this attack, and we will finish what you started. The Council had made a terrible mistake, believing this restraint was weakness. Aboard the Ember Crown, half of Thessaly's remaining captains were already requesting permission to disengage. The princess refused to believe it. Pride, more than strategy, kept her fleet in the fight for another 11 brutal minutes. Minutes that cost the Dominion 6 more warships and hundreds of lives. All while the human fleet, despite holding every tactical advantage, continued targeting only weapons and engines, sparing life support systems and crew quarters with a precision that unsettled Dominion officers more than outright aggression would have. It was Scout-Commander Yrel, watching the battle unfold from the crippled remains of her own cutter, who finally understood what she was witnessing. The humans weren't fighting to conquer. They were fighting to end the fight, as quickly and mercifully as their overwhelming advantage allowed, and every choice they made on the battlefield was a message aimed not at Dominion weapons, but at Dominion pride. We could destroy you completely, we are choosing not to. She opened a direct channel to the Ember Crown, overriding jammed frequencies with a scout vessel's dedicated emergency band, and spoke words she never imagined she would say to her own princess. Highness, stand down, please. I saw their defenses 3 weeks ago and was told I was imagining things. I am not imagining this. If we do not surrender now, there will be nothing left of this fleet to bring home. The Queen suddenly froze. For aboard the Dominion capital, Empress Thessaly Korrin, Thessaly's own mother, had been listening to the entire engagement through an emergency relay, having overridden War Council protocol the moment casualty reports began arriving. She had lost a husband to Dominion overreach 30 years earlier and had sworn never to lose a child to the same arrogance. Order the withdrawal, the Empress commanded, her voice cutting across every channel with the unquestionable authority of the throne itself. Now, Thessaly. That is not a request. The princess, humiliated and furious, gave the order. The ceasefire that followed was awkward, tense, and utterly unprecedented in Dominion military history. A surrendering fleet escorted not into captivity, but into a careful, dignified withdrawal. Human vessels standing guard over crippled Dominion ships to ensure no opportunistic third party attacked while they were vulnerable. Admiral Cho herself transmitted safe passage codes for every damaged vessel, an act of tactical generosity that Dominion strategists would spend the next decade trying to understand. It was Yrel who requested, against every instinct of Dominion pride, a formal meeting with the human admiral before the withdrawal was complete. She expected arrogance. She expected a conqueror's lecture. What she found instead, standing in a small conference pod between their two fleets, was a tired woman in a plain uniform who looked, more than anything, relieved that the fighting had stopped. You could have destroyed us completely, Yrel said. Your fleet held every advantage. Why did you hold back? Admiral Cho considered the question with the weight it deserved. Because winning a war and winning a peace aren't the same thing, Commander. We didn't come here to make an enemy for the next 100 years. We came here to protect a treaty and a handful of scientists who didn't deserve to die for a resource dispute. If we'd slaughtered your entire fleet today, your empire would spend the next century teaching its children to hate us. I'd rather spend that century proving you were wrong to underestimate us in the first place. Yrel had no response to that. In 3 centuries of Dominion conquest, no enemy had ever offered mercy as a strategy rather than a weakness. The War Council that convened on the Dominion capital in the aftermath was a very different gathering than the one that had launched the invasion. Fleet Marshal Kesk, humiliated by his own dismissal of Yrel's warnings, resigned his commission within the week. Princess Thessaly, stripped of operational command by her own mother's order, would spend the following 2 years studying human history and diplomacy, under her Empress's direct instruction, A punishment that would, in time, reshape her into the very diplomat who eventually negotiated the Dominion's first lasting peace treaty with humanity. And Scout-Commander Yrel Dashkov, the officer whose warnings had been dismissed as fantasy, found herself promoted to head the Dominion's newly formed Human Affairs Division, tasked with a single, sobering mandate. Never again let arrogance blind an entire empire to a truth that had been visible all along. Years later, addressing a new class of Dominion Scout cadets, she would tell them the story of Threll, not as a tale of defeat, but as a warning worth remembering forever. They let us believe we were strong, she told the young officers, right up until the moment it mattered, and when that moment came, they showed us exactly how much strength they had chosen not to use. Remember this, all of you, the most dangerous fleet in the galaxy is not the one that boasts the loudest. It is the one that says nothing at all, until the day it finally has to. The final entry in the official Dominion War Archive, on the Threll incident, ended with a single line, added by Empress Valerie herself, that every Dominion officer since has been required to memorize before assuming command of a warship. We mistook their silence for weakness. It was patience. Never make that mistake again.